Welcome to Jurassic Park.
That's you. That's the guy she told you not to worry about.
Hello. How's it going, dude?
Doing alright?
Good to see you. Sorry we're so late.
They say you never want to meet your idols, but when I met Ray, I met my idol. I'm kidding, not really. I love Ray. We were able to go and head over all the way to Virginia to go visit the old FortuneAuto gang. Ray and the rest of the team greeted us at the door, and it was absolutely insane to actually see the facility in person.
I'll be a gentleman.
Thanks.
Cool immediately.
Alex, you don't work. You don't work here. What are you?
Collecting celebrity signatures.
Jesus.
What?
What are you doing?
You can sell this whiteboard.
There we go. I was gonna say I'm gonna cut out
You
that
can
corner
sell
of the
this
whiteboard.
whiteboard.
Put it on
70%.
Alright, so yeah, this is everyone's station. They all have a station where they can build their shocks, assembly, things like that. Obviously these fancy machines are gonna be the dynos. So the graphs are gonna show up on these screens here as they're dynoing their shocks. As you can tell, some of the guys like to decorate their stations. We're all car enthusiasts here, so I think we all can enjoy a little good Hot Wheels hunt, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They always say a lot of times that seeing that like made in America or built in America sticker doesn't really mean a whole lot when you're just looking at it on a box. But to see the entire assembly, to see the entire team, to see the sales and the service and the manufacturing and the production and the testing team, it was really cool. It was nice to see that this was something that was being assembled and put together right here in Virginia.
This is one of our CFD pistons. This is the piston that goes into our 510 and up. So this will be in our 510s, 520s, Pro Series shocks as well. This is what's called a double digressive piston. This is our concave flow digressive design. This will allow for like a ton of driver input control. It gives you really, really sharp and precise feedback while you're on track. And it does feature that nice blow-off ability that we have, where if you hit a curve on track, or like you said, hit a speed bump at 65 miles an hour, you're not going to feel that, and it's not going to upset the chassis of the car. So this piston is...
So this is independent from this process?
They are connected together. So
okay.
These are the shims. Shims here, the way that this works is, just grab a couple of shims out here. So on the shaft, and we don't have one assembled right here, it's now in the shock, but inside of the shock you've got your piston, and then on the piston a bunch of shims go. And the organization, the order, the number, and the different thickness, you see there's like a chart here we have for different thicknesses of the shims. These recipes determine how the car feels. These are going to be specific to every car. They're going to be specific to a car with a different spring rate. If you have the same car like a 2015 WRX, right? VA is our bread and butter. We love that chassis, and we support that chassis, and so that's one of the ones we have like a lot of different recipes for, because you'll have people that are running super soft, like 5 and 6K comfort rates, and then you'll have people running 12 and 14K high aero builds, and so the recipes for this are going to be different for all of them. So even though it's the same car, the shocks might be the same length, springs might be the same length, but the rates and the weights and all those different factors,
The things inside.
exactly, those all determine basically what combination of little shims go on here. That determines how the car's going to handle. First, for this set of shocks here,
Okay.
the D's and C's on this page here, these represent the rear shocks. The A's and B's over there represent the front shocks. You see we have some information about the just the general like package, what it is for, and then serial numbers. But we also have spring rates on here to note, give some correlation to this valving profile. So what you're seeing here, this is the soft valving. So if you take your 24 clicks of damping adjustment, you go all the way to 0, so full soft, that's what this is going to look like. This is a force versus absolute velocity. So if you have this line here as 0, numbers in the positive direction are compression damping, which is when the shock shaft is moving in. Numbers in the negative are rebound damping, when the shock shaft is moving out. The negative direction down here, this is going to be the shock controlling how fast the spring can extend. So when you hit a bump, first, you're going to see this happen. The shock shaft is moving in, the The spring is compressing, the shock is compressing, your wheel is moving up. Then, this is going to happen. Your spring is going to try to extend with all the force that was stored from that bump. This line here determines how fast the spring can extend. So here on the soft curve, we run our dyno plots out here to 9 inches per second. So on the x-axis we have velocity in inches per second. On the y-axis we have how much force it's doing. These are in negative, but you can still think of them as real whole numbers. We break this down into kind of 3 mid-ranges. You've got your driver inputs, your mid-speed bumps, and then your high-speed bump events, or your high-speed events, right? So this is stuff that we would consider like you're turning the wheel, you're rolling into a corner, the car is leaning over from, digging into a big berm on track or something like that. This mid-speed range here, these are going to be like mid-speed driving. You're going, at the speed limit in a school zone, and you hit a big bump in the road.
Sure.
Or you hit a pothole or something. And then these are your higher speed events. So this is where we would see stuff like curbing on track. You're attacking a curb very, very hard mid-corner. Big bumps and divots, bridge joints specifically come to mind because those are like, you're going very fast usually, and they're a very short bump. So that's going to be a super high speed event. So this curve here, this just references basically how much the shock absorber or damper is affecting the spring. So if you go way out here at the lower speed range, these are going to show up as a little bit more linear, meaning they don't have this big knee in them. This big knee here is what the digressive piston does.
And this is when you're at higher or the higher
Correct.
clicks?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this middle line is 0. This upper line here is 24.
Max.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And so up here at the top end, you see we make a ton of force right away, immediately in this first little section. So
meaning this will go back to fully out. I guess I don't know the term, in less than a second?
It'll go much slower. So we have more force, which is going to keep the spring constrained.
Gotcha.
So when you're leaning the car over, in that mid kind of corner entry, the car is loading up, you're loading up, you're loading up. In the 0 to 1 inch per second range, you're going to go from generating 0 pounds to generating 475 pounds of force resisting that motion.
So this is just what's happening inside the shock, is what you're
Exactly.
saying, before the spring really does anything that it.
Well, the spring is part of this system.
Mm-hmm.
So this force here that you're seeing, this like 475 pounds at around half an inch per second, that's going to affect anything that's connected to the shock absorber. The spring, the car, everything else. The difference here, this gap here that you see, the range between those two lines, this is going to determine basically your level of control over the vehicle. So this here, the lower end section, this is going to be much more comfortable, it's going to be more compliant, it's going to let the spring rebound quicker. So that means if you hit a bump on the road or if you hit a big divot in the road, the spring will be able to keep the tire in contact with the road quicker.
Gotcha.
As you move up here to your stiffer range, you can either keep the vehicle planted flat on a smooth prepped surface like a track, where you don't have to worry about those big dips and bumps events. You can maintain platform control, keep the vehicle as level as possible. Or if you're running a stiffer spring, even if you're on the street, you can take advantage of this valving range to up your damping force and be able to run a stiffer spring without having that bumping or porpoising effect on the highway. Your car's not going to be just bobbing down the road because you can maintain control over that higher spring rate. So as the shock moves in, right, more of this rod is now inside the shock than what's outside the
pressurizes
socket. Yeah, so it's displacing fluid. The fluid has to go somewhere. And so this is,
I was gonna say, I think that's
this is
pretty
an
in there.
atrocious example because this is at the bottom.
Yeah.
But what would normally happen, and what is happening inside that shock right over there, is this piston here, this thing is actually floating probably about
Oh, so it's
right
floating.
here. It's disconnected from any other thing inside the shock. It's just sealed in place with like a wear band and underneath of this, near the sticker, there's a fill port. Charge the shock with nitrogen, and so in this shock, this area where the piston is filled with oil, and this area underneath the tube, or underneath the divider piston here, is filled with nitrogen. The oil is not compressible, but the nitrogen is. So when you push this in, and it's displacing fluid, instead of blowing the bottom of the shock off, it just compresses the nitrogen.
And then this gets pressured down. And then
It
it
moves a
comes
little
back
bit,
up.
exactly. And it just has to move a little bit, just enough to allow that displacement not to blow seals out of
What
your
is this
shock.
called?
Divider piston or floating piston.
What does that do? It divides the oil and the nitrogen.
Exactly. So I think some shocks call it like IFP. I've seen like a lot of off-road shocks. They call it an internal floating piston. Yeah. This is a monotube shock. So there's one tube. The piston divides that tube. On half of it is gas. On half of it is oil.
We continue on now.
Oh wow! Thank you.
Ooh. The other cool thing I will say is that they have a Haas machine there. And the Haas machine is manufacturing all sorts of fun little tiny bits and pieces. When we were there, I think I saw them making the actual locking collars for the FortuneAuto Coilovers right here, right in Virginia, right in the Haas machine. It was just a wild thing to see.
This is Tyler. He's the one who does all the machining here.
Jealous, Tyler.
These are expensive.
I'll let him get that shot.
Everybody wants a Haas machine. Haas machines like Ferrari.
Here's the finished product.
So this is a completed assembly. So the damper mounts here just like it normally would on your standard like 3-bolt Subaru camber plate. Yeah, as was mentioned, Honda Fits have a very economic strut tower situation where there's just a round hole and a big rubber bushing sandwiches in there. So we've leveraged that mounting solution with this billet aluminum assembly that threads up in there and then locks in place just like the OEM bushing.
Yeah.
Right?
On your camber plates, it has the same nuts and bolts. What you're gonna do is adjust that, loosen those up.
That locks in place.
Oh.
Yeah.
Slide back and forth.
I was gonna say it's a little different, but it's similar.
Damn.
Like the concept is the same, right?
Yeah.
The team is very small at FortuneAuto, and it's a very intimate team. We got to watch the entire process in a single room in 5 different stations, and that was a really cool feeling because it made it feel like what you were buying was actually getting paid attention to. That the coilover that you're waiting sometimes 3 to 5 weeks for is because it's this team that's putting it together right here in the United States, making sure it's as perfect as it can possibly be, and if it's not perfect, rebuilding the whole thing from the ground up again. And that was a really cool feeling. It made me feel a lot more confident once I was able to see a lot of the components, to see the Swift springs that they keep on stock, to see how they're assembled and how they're torqued and how they're tested, to see all of that happen with every single coilover that leaves their facility was a really cool experience. And afterwards, we got to get some drinks with Ray, and we got to quickly learn that the entire town is actually kind of small. And in all honesty, it was a lot of fun.